My name is Pastor Bob. I am the senior pastor here at Hacienda Christian Fellowship. So I'll be speaking on the behalf of Hacienda Christian Fellowship and our role in the Exodus 8.1 project. Right next to me is Sarah Yetter. She is representing the Exodus 8.1 project and her father, Pastor E. Perez Romero, or as we call him around here, Pastor Eddie. So we'll be referring to him mostly as Pastor Eddie. And so she'll be speaking for the family, for the project, and for her father. Right next to her is Shaw Ashford. He will be representing and speaking for the persecuted, those in Iran. This morning, I want to just go ahead and give you my opening statement. We will then each take turns giving our statement for those that we're representing. Then we'll also have a short video that was taken by Pastor Eddie before he went to Iran. And then we'll open it up for questions. So, at Hacienda Christian Fellowship, we're deeply committed to simple truths. Our deep commitment to simple truth is played out in actions and not just in words. The truth we are deeply committed to is to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. This loving our neighbor is true for our community, as next month we will be providing around 1,000 low-income families a complete Thanksgiving dinner. But it also extends outside of our community. We have learned from Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan that our neighbor is anyone we find in need, no matter where they live and no matter what culture they're from. We have come to see that we have sisters and brothers in faith who are suffering and imprisoned simply for their desire to hold to the same truths that we do, to love God and their neighbor. We believe that God has called us to stand alongside our sisters and brothers. Hebrews 13:3 says to remember those in prison as if we ourselves were in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering. If I were in prison, I would want someone to pray for me. If I were in prison, I would want someone to speak for me. And that is what we're doing here today. We are raising our voices for those whose voice has been silenced. That is what Exodus 8.1 is doing. Although the Exodus 8.1 project was done independent of Hacienda Christian Fellowship, and E. Perez Romero, or as we call him, Pastor Eddie, no longer has an official connection to HCF due to his recent retirement, we do stand 100% in support of Pastor Eddie and the Exodus 8.1 project. And we do say along with them, let my people go, that they may worship me. And now, Sarah will give her statement.
Good morning. Today at 9:10 a.m., Pastor Eddie Romero made a declaration of protest at the gates of the notorious Evin prison in Tehran and surrendered to the authorities of the Iranian government. That's 9:10 a.m. their time. This was 10:30 p.m. last night for us. Well, 3 days earlier, Thursday at about 10 p.m. in Tehran, Pastor Eddie left his tour group, which had been sightseeing in the city of Tehran, and went into hiding in preparation for yesterday's protest. Details about his protest are still forthcoming, including the filming more video that we're hoping for in the next 24 hours. Pastor Eddie used Ustream to live stream his protest using an iPhone he had hidden in his pocket. There was about 6 minutes of video along with about 30 minutes of audio that we heard live last night at about 10:30 p.m. A group of family and friends had gathered here to watch that live. Well, a few highlights from the audio from last night. They included Pastor Eddie making a declaration from the scripture of Exodus 8.1 that's already been mentioned, which states, "The Lord says, let my people go that they may worship me," as well as shouting repeatedly the names of the 5 Iranian prisoners whose unlawful detention he's protesting. Well, he surrendered willingly and was taken inside the gates of the prison by a guard into sort of a waiting room, from what we can see. He was heard being questioned about where he was from by someone in English. And he was heard repeating his appeal for the 5 prisoners about 7 more times. He was also heard saying, "I am not here representing any country," as well as speaking in both English and Spanish. Pastor Eddie was. At one point, they seemed to realize that he had a phone turned on because he told them their conversation was being broadcast everywhere. Our Farsi translator tells us that the guards seemed very confused and weren't sure if he was really protesting or just trying to visit one of the prisoners. And they were heard making plans to bring in an English translator. At about 11:09 p.m. our time, the phone call was cut off, and we don't have any word from him since then. We don't know the current status of Pastor Eddie, where he's been taken or what's currently happening to him. His last known whereabouts were inside Evin Prison. But we can answer some of your questions regarding the nature of his protest and his reasons for it. Pastor Eddie's protest was peaceful but direct. He raises his voice on behalf of prisoners of faith and conscience that are being detained by the government. You may already know that Pastor Eddie protested and was detained at the 2008 Olympics in Beijing on behalf of jailed pastors and people of conscience. He was also arrested in 2012 in downtown LA at the protest of the then vice president, which is a now president of China. In 2008, he founded an organization called Exodus 8:1, whose mission it is to be a voice for the voiceless. The approach is that of direct engagement with governments through peaceful protest on behalf of people of faith who have been jailed without due process and separated from their families. So Pastor Eddie's has a similar intent during this current project. The government of Iran has a well-documented history of jailing religious minorities. Pastor Eddie hopes that his protest and surrender in a public manner will draw the attention of a watching world to the plight of jailed pastors and journalists and human rights advocates in a country that has effectively closed its doors to human rights organizations and observers. His is a humanitarian plea not only to the government of Iran, but also to the watching world that this kind of human rights abuse is intolerable and inexcusable in our global society. Pastor Eddie intends to seek solidarity with these prisoners of conscience by his own peaceful surrender, which he did. Specifically, he advocates for the following: Farshid Bathi, an Iranian Christian pastor; Saeed Abedini, a naturalized American citizen from Iran who started an orphanage in Tehran and was arrested; Mustafa Bordbar, Christian activist; Ali Reza Saidian, a member of the Christian House Church movement; and Mohammed Ali Dorkha, prominent human rights lawyer in Tehran and co-founder of Defenders of Human Rights in Iran. Those are the 5. Again, Pastor Eddie is asking for the release of these prisoners as well as for the government of Iran to restore its former commitment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which they have already signed and ratified. Lastly, Pastor Eddie was clear with me that his protest is not against the religion of Islam, nor against the people of Iran, who have a rich history and culture to share with the rest of the world. In fact, during his limited communication, during the time of his hiding, he had nothing but good things to say about how he was treated by the citizens of Iran. His protest is against a government that claims sovereignty in order to close doors against outside observers, organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. He hopes that his presence alongside these prisoners of conscience will raise awareness of the human stories behind the issues that we often hear about, as well as bring pressure to bear on the government itself. So I know the question that many would ask: what's a Chicano pastor from La Puente, California doing on the other side of the world, doing a protest all by himself? Pastor Eddie's answer is simple. Those Iranian pastors and women and men of faith are like family to him, even though he has never met them. They are his family, his familia, because they belong to the same family of faith. He simply could not go into retirement and sit idly by while his brothers and sisters, his sisters and his brothers waste away in prisons, missing their children's birthdays and enduring unspeakable abuse. He's there to literally bother the Iranian government like a gadfly bothering a horse. Some of you know that Pastor Eddie even goes by the name Gadfly online on his website. I know one document that my dad's talked about is when he read Socrates. Socrates said, I'm like a gadfly. Rome is a noble steed, and I'm just bothering it in the right direction. And I think he feels very similarly that the government of Iran is a noble steed that needs to be bothered in the right direction. He's very well aware of his relative size in comparison to the government. He knows that he's just one person. And he knows he's up against a big, big structure and a big, big system. He hopes for a future, however, where any ordinary citizen anywhere in the world feels that they can partake through peaceful civil disobedience and advocacy, seeking justice for the oppressed. And he hopes for a future where no government, no matter how intimidating they may be, will feel safe from the conscientious agitators of this world. He is fully prepared to accept the consequences for his actions. His objective continues to be a voice for the voiceless to the people of faith and conscience in Iran. And we will certainly be sending updates as soon as we have any. We just don't currently know where he's at. And we look forward to hearing news from him soon. Thank you.
I want to thank the media for giving us the honor to speak on behalf of Pastor Eddie. My name is Shahrukh Afshar. They call me Shah for short. I'm an Iranian MBB. MBB stands for Muslim Background Believer. It refers to a Muslim who has left Islam to follow Jesus Christ. In 1971, I made a decision to leave Islam and follow Christ. I consequently started the first Iranian Christian organization in the United States. 40 years ago, I could count on one hand how many MBB Iranians were that I knew. Today, by some account, there are about 500,000 of us, which has created a problem for the Islamic Republic of Iran. In the present, Iran is the fastest Muslim country coming to Christ. The other night, someone asked me if Pastor Eddie was local for doing what he's doing. I'd like to ask you a question. Have you ever been passionate for something? This could be something trivial or unimportant to the rest of the world, but very important to you. Something like appearing on a talent show, for example. You're willing to give up everything you have to make it. Well, there's still people in this world who are willing to sacrifice it all for not personal gain, but for the sake of others. And Pastor Eddie is one of them. Being an American, he has tasted the privilege of worshiping God in freedom. And he desires to see this privilege extended to our brothers and sisters in Iran. No, Pastor Eddie is not crazy, but he's a man who is so concerned about the suffering of our MBBs, brothers and sisters in Iran, that he's willing to do what he's doing and sacrifice it all. Thank you very much.
If I could just ask also Shah to explain a little bit more about the Iranian 5. Did you want to give a little bit more of a bio background?
I certainly could. As you see the photos in the back, these are the four of these brothers are there because of their faith. They have Farshid Fathi behind me. He was arrested again within the Islamic Republic of Iran. If you're a Christian-born person, that's fine, meaning if your parents are Assyrians or Armenians or you're born into a Christian family, that's fine. The problem that the Islamic Republic of Iran are with MBBs, those who have left Islam to follow Christ. And those are the ones who receive the most of all suffering right now. These five, their greatest sin has been to leave Islam to follow Christ. The Iranian government has an issue with house churches. And because so many of these brothers and sisters cannot attend regular churches, because regular churches are often afraid of having these people come to their churches. When I say regular churches, I mean church buildings where there are Christian backgrounds. But they want to worship the Lord in Farsi and not in Armenian or Syrian and other languages. So they have house churches, which has become a very fast-moving movement in Iran. And often these brothers have been arrested for attending these house churches. Now, I can go through every one of these brothers, but it might take a while. But I have to tell you that my brother here, Farshid Fadhi, is one of the greatest Christians I know, and from his writings from the prison and what he is willing to go through right now and how he has stood fast for his faith. I happen to know Saeed's family, and again, he's a man who started the house churches. By the time they had him leave Iran the first time, he had started 200 house churches in Iran. And then when the regime changed, or the president changed, with the new president, he was having a hard time, so he left Iran. But then on his 9th trip back to Iran, he was arrested. And he goes on and on and on. Mustafa, another brother who was arrested simply because he had left Islam to follow Christ, and then also for attending house churches. The last one, Mr. Dadkha, is my hero. He's a man who is not an MBB. He's a Muslim man who has devoted his life on behalf of the rights of these men and women. And that's why he's in prison, because he's demanding human rights of these people. Thank you very much.